de Hollywood nos anos 50 e 60. Inclusive, fez muito par com Sandra Dee. Eu falo de John Saxon. Ele estrelou mais de 100 filmes, trabalhou na Itália, ficou muito amigo de Clint Eastwood. E depois desta entrevista, você irá assistir aqui no Telecine Classic um filme estrelado por Saxon, Obsessão de Matar, War Hunt, onde ele tem como coadjuvantes Sidney Pollack e Robert Redford. Eu fiquei surpreendido em ver que Mr. Saxon é uma pessoa muito simpática. Nos recebeu em sua casa em Brentwood, nós conversamos no jardim e ele trocou ideias sobre tudo, com a maior sinceridade. Não escondeu sequer o pouco cabelo que ele tinha. Nos filmes, às vezes, ele aparecia de peruca. Ali, ao vivo, não teve o menor problema de mostrar seu rosto real. Eu fiquei muito contente em saber que esse ator, que era apenas um galã, hoje em dia se tornou também uma pessoa inteligente que você vai ter prazer em ouvir.
I started in 1954, came here to Los Angeles. I was under contract. That was one change. The contract system. It lasted for the length of my contract, which was about 7 years. By the early 60s, the studios were no longer having this kind of roster of young players. I started when I was 18, and they had 25 people like myself that they hoped would become somebody important, that they could invest in 25 if one or two became somebody, like Tony Curtis did and Rock Hudson and so on. Clint Eastwood was in the group that I was a part of. That ended in early 60s. That was one big change. From then on, I think there was the advent of the acceptance of television and the recognition that television was a big, big part of American movie watching or watching of things, you know. It changed, for example, the company, Universal, that used to make, of 30 films, 15 were Westerns. Afterwards, in the 60s, there was television shows, Gunsmoke, Bonanza, so on and so forth. So who wanted to go out to see a Western when they could have the Westerns all over television? Television became important then.
You were born in New York?
Yeah, in Brooklyn.
You're Latin, you're from...
My family roots are all from southern Italy. My grandfather was born, of whom I am really named after, not John Saxon, but my real name. He was born in Salerno, which is south of Naples. My mother was born in a place called Caserta, which is about 20 miles from Naples.
When they changed your name, I mean, here.
Yeah, when I came here in the 50s, mid-50s, it was still very much the custom to assume a professional name. I was not opposed to this idea. My name is Carmine Orico. It still is Carmine Orico on my passport, a.k.a. John Saxon, also known as John Saxon. But I thought, first of all, it sounded a little too esoteric, like Rudolph Valentino or something. I thought it was too much of another time and an era, you know? And so I was pleased to have the opportunity to change it professionally. The way I changed it had nothing to do with my knowledge to Saxon of history at that time. I was still just about 18. It was because there was a team of roller hockey players in Brooklyn called the Saxons. And they were just an amateur bunch of young people, but they were close to almost perfection. They were Scandinavian, most of them. The Scandinavian section of Brooklyn had Norwegians, Swedes, Danes, and so on. And they must have had some sort of instinct about playing hockey, even though it was on roller skates. They were the Saxons. That name stuck in my mind. So when I came here, I said, Saxon. I said, how about John Saxon? Oh, okay, so I became John Saxon.
Still? How do you like our horse? Could have found you a better straight man, could we?
Can I have a word with you, sir? Perhaps later, Mr. Steele.
It's a beautiful animal, isn't it, Sonny?
Yes, sir, he's an amazing animal, but he don't belong in a parking lot in Las Vegas.
Well, I don't suppose Las Vegas is the most natural place in the world for any of us, is it?
Well, I don't know, sir. I don't think he's feeling so good.
Let's give him a drink.
I got a job as an extra in a movie that introduced Jack Lemmon, and that was also...
It should happen to you.
Yeah, it should happen to you. And it was wonderful. I think I was earning $30 a day, and it was just you know, a ball to be in New York making money. Like, that was a lot of money at that time. And there was a scene in Central Park, and the director said, "Come here, you stand between them." They were arguing, and they were arguing to another, and he had me stand right in the middle, looking, you know, like this, like that, like that. It was like a screen test. People noticed, who is that person there, or something like that. And so they mentioned that as if it was the start of it, but I was an extra. No credits, nothing. I was just an extra in the background.
Did they taught you everything at Universal? I mean, fencing and horse riding?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, the program included classes in acting. You know, I don't know. I don't remember if we met once or twice a week. We prepared scenes to do. And there was also kind of like a test every so often. Everybody was required to do a scene for the casting directors at the studio to see if you were progressing. I mean, I was a kid, you know. To me, it was, first of all, it was a wonderful experience. I mean, I was living away from home. I was earning enough to buy a car, to have my own apartment. And I was learning all these things, including horseback riding. Every Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock and every Saturday until the laws changed and you didn't work on Saturday. We went to the back lot, and they had stables and horses and wranglers. And Clint Eastwood learned to ride along with me, and we would, you know, we got to, because Westerns were an important part of production at that time. So if you couldn't ride a horse, you weren't in such good shape. And then I tested for a movie, which was my first major role, a picture called The Unguarded Moment. And it was a very good story. It's something that could be done today and still hold up in terms of the story. A psychological study of a father's negative influence on a young son against women, because he was negative against women. So he instilled in the son, women are no good, they'll betray you, they'll this and that. And the son became a little bit aggressive with the teacher, which was Esther Williams at that time. It was a good movie, good story. And I became introducing John Saxon. From then on in, I did one film after another at Universal.
Didn't Rosalind also had something to do with...
I believe she suggested the story. She suggested the story. And you're up on all your information here, yeah.
You did, I think, 3 or 4 films with Sandra Dee.
3.
3.
Yeah.
And what do you remember about that? You think it was...
Well, I've been asked about her because she's had a difficult time in the last, I don't know how many years. 10 years ago, I did a play with her. Yeah, for a short while, just 1 week. A thing called Love Letters. I don't know if you've heard of it. You've heard of it, yeah. And I suggested that we do it together, and they thought it was a good idea, and we did it. The night we started, we both walked on the stage, and the audience stood up and started applauding and applauding and applauding, and I thought it would never end. It was mostly for her because it had become common knowledge that she had had a difficult life and so on and so forth. The applause lasted so long, I turned, I said, "Sandra, let's leave now because we'll never get any better than this," you know. And we did a good job for a week, you know, but I've seen her once since, that's all. The first film we did, I had this odd feeling. We were supposed to be teenage, you know. Kissing her, I felt a little awkward. And I think it was because she was actually younger, and I sensed she was younger than she said she was. She may have been only 14 or 15. She was saying she was 16 or something. And I had really awkward. I remember the director was a German. He says, "I understand, you're too old for this part." Then we did The Reluctant Debutante.
Oh, are you
which was a great experience because it was the first time I went to Europe. And I worked in France with Rex Harrison and his wife, Kay Kendall, and Vincent Minnelli, who was the director. It was, boy, some experience being in Paris for 10 or 12 weeks and having a lot of francs in your pocket, just running around town. It was a great time.
There's another movie I heard about, the story of Unforgiven. Yeah. The one that John Huston, they cut your part a lot. Is that true?
And how, yeah. And how. And you know, the funny part of it is, it took me 30 years to put the story together. I didn't know why it had happened. I didn't know what was going on, but 30 years later, I read a book called The Hustons, the whole history of the Huston family. And I picked it up in a bookstore, and I looked at it, and I said, I wonder if I want to read this. And I said, let me look in the index and see. And I saw John Saxon. I said, oh, well, I'm in it. So I looked at the page, and one page, and it was the story of why I got cut out. It wasn't Houston. That was a great experience for me. But in the film, the character I played was very mysterious. He was considered to be...
Half-breed, wasn't he?
Yes, Indian. They thought he was Indian. And the story was about the racial hatred of the whites and the Indians back and forth. And Audrey Hepburn seemed to be part of the family of Burt Lancaster, his sister. What came out in the story was the Indians were always coming to say, we want her back. And nobody understood what are they talking about, what are they here for? But the truth of it was that she was an Indian infant left when there was a raid on an Indian village, and everybody was killed except this baby. And the mother, played by Lillian Gish, the mother of Burt Lancaster, she had lost a child that she was about to give birth to. So she picked up this other infant, and she told her family that this is your sister. I played someone who looked like an Indian, who everybody was sort of, you know, get that guy out of here, and so on and so forth. But I wasn't an Indian. The character's name was Johnny Portugal, and I was supposed to be part Portuguese, part Greek, and part Irish. But since I looked like an Indian and everybody was treating me badly, I wore Indian clothes to say, you know, there, so what? And Huston wanted to make this movie more of this racial element. So I became a vehicle that he added scenes to. I had a scene, one scene with Audrey Hepburn that was not in the script, where somehow there's some sense of an affinity between us, and we meet on the plains on our horses and go down to and start a fire and sleep by the fire in the night, and then as the fire is ended, I roll over onto her cut, you understand? So there was a sense of a kind of romance. Then in the end, when it comes out that she's an Indian, that I assume that her family are going to disown her, I go to save her and I get killed by the Indians. All that was cut out. It was a tragic role of a kind of hero underneath. Mel Ferrer, who was Audrey's husband, I heard him say in a darkened projection room when they were showing the rushes, I don't think he knew I was there. He says, you know, this kid's got a possible supporting nomination here. What happened was there was a feud going on between Lancaster and Huston. The more that Huston built up my role, the more that Lancaster didn't like it, especially the scene with Audrey, you see. Because the end of the story, when we find out that she's not his sister, he embraces her, not me, you see. So I got lost.
So that was Lancaster.
It was Lancaster. And he always seemed friendly to me. I never knew it was him. That's such his life.
Yeah, that's Hollywood, that's life also.
You say there's a battalion here? Uh-huh. And a brand new mortar battery right here.
That's right.
I did a film in 1961, which we haven't mentioned, called War Hunt. This was again a low-budget film, black and white, filmed in Topanga Canyon. A story about the Korean War and about a soldier who is demented or psychopathic, who serves in war very well because he's willing to go out on reconnaissance missions all by himself because he enjoys stalking a sentry and killing them. But afterwards he comes back and he tells the captain exactly they're moving the machine guns from here to here, so they love him. But they also begin to know that he's a little crazy. And in the end, there's a truce that he won't, he says, what truce? Which war? He's fighting his own war, as it were.
Okay.
Robert Redford was introduced in the film. Sidney Pollack played a role. And some other very good actors, Tom Skerritt and Gavin MacLeod, were in it. When the film was finished, it was produced by United Artists. They had, I think, 5 men who were the board of the... 2 liked it, 3 didn't like it, and they fought. They, you know, this is, what is this? I don't understand it. It was poetic. It was a poetic version of something. The 2 of them prevailed that they were going to open it in San Diego at San Diego was a base for the Navy at the time. And I was going to go down and do some publicity. I went down and there was in a theater, there were 6 sailors in the theater. And there was no publicity, so he yanked it. Later in the year, it was Time Magazine's one of the 10 best films of the year. But by that time, it was in the storage room.
Bruce Lee, Enter the Dragon. I'll probably talk a lot about him, but
you know, I've been asked so often, of all the people I've worked with, if you put them together, Brando, Sean Connery, Burt Lancaster, Robert Redford, if you put them all together, occasionally people say, what was it like working with Marlon Brando? Put them all together and it's only a little fraction of how often I'm asked, what was it like working with Bruce Lee? I almost didn't do the movie. I agreed to do it, and then I read the script the second time, and I thought, this is you know, I don't know what it is. I mean, it's a lot of fights, and there was not much. It was a thin script, you know, not even a full script. It looked more like a treatment. So the last minute, I was wanting to get out, back out. My agent didn't have the nerve to tell the producers. He says, you tell them. And I felt obliged to do that because I had agreed to do it and I felt like I had to explain. So finally we got on some terms because I wanted more to act. I wanted more character, something more, some scenes. And by that time, you know, I could read a scene and say, you know, this could be a little bit more. It could be amplified, and it would be interesting if they did this and that. So I said, what if we, you know, they said, well, what's your trouble? I said, well, it's not enough to act. What if, for example, if the scene, oh yeah, that's a great idea. So they gave me a story about adding stuff, some of which we did, and in the end, it never appeared in the film. So I was a little nervous about doing the fighting stuff. I even hurt myself one time and pulled a muscle, you know, badly. And Bruce Lee was a little bit nervous about the acting part. He knew. I got to know him better right away, you know. And we got along very well. But he was a little nervous about, it was his big chance. He had made 3 films in Hong Kong that were successful there. This was his chance for an American production. And he had great sense of confidence that he was going to conquer the world. The last time I spoke to him, I didn't see him. He was in Los Angeles. I lived at that time down at another house down here. And I got this call from him, and I was surprised. Because in the movie business, sometimes you work with somebody, and you never see them again and never speak to them. So I said, hi, what are you doing? And he was come for medical tests. And he said things. I said, medical tests? He says, yeah, I've been fainting. I said, fainting? Wow. I thought he was joking at first, you know. And then he said, yeah, maybe there won't be a Bruce Lee. And I called him back a few days later. He left me his telephone number, and he said, maybe we'll get together before I leave. So I waited a few days and I called him because I was concerned. I thought, oh, he just doesn't sound like him. And all of a sudden he sounded altogether different. He said, the doctor said I have the body of an 18-year-old. So I figured the story was all over. And we had a brief conversation, and he was leaving shortly to go back to Hong Kong to do some editing, or helping on the editing of the film. And maybe 2.5 months after that, somebody said, Bruce Lee's dead. I said, what? What are you talking about? And I called the Warner Brothers. I said, I just heard something. And they said, it's true. So that was it. So.
Our head of security has confirmed your identity with the Detroit police. But neither they nor I understand what you're doing at Wonderworld.
I told you I was investigating a crime, and I think I'm in the right place because I've been here for 10 minutes and already been shot at.
May I ask you, just out of curiosity, do you regret anything that you have done or haven't done?
Oh, yeah. I regret... well, in a sense, that the cumulative effect of my career has been quantity as opposed to quality. I didn't know how I would get, or maybe didn't have enough patience or guidance. You have to be. I come up with an idea that career is character. Some people are geniuses, and then they burn out. Orson Welles, you know. Marlon Brando was, you know, he's older, you know. And I'm not making any different kinds of arcs in their career. I worked almost constantly with only brief periods of difficulty for 40 years. But I did a lot more quantity than quality. And I don't think I distinguished myself the way I might have if I had continued, or if I knew what I wanted to do. I suppose maybe to some extent it started out because I started so young. I didn't have a sense of, you know, I mean, I was hired to do a job, whatever it was. And then I got, I think, a little bit cynical about the whole movies when I started being hired enough and making enough that I could do whatever they asked. And if it was 2-3 weeks of this thing, I could do that. I'd do it, and the hell with it. My interests were at home, other interests. The one thing that I do also think that was good, that affected my career. Now I think, and I hope, that I can do something in, I don't know how many more years I'm going to be acting, but more significant now. I don't know what it is exactly. Nobody else seems to know either. More significant than anything I've done in the past. I think just because I'm got more mature, more, I don't know what else, more capable, you know. But it's not going to be Enter the Dragon or stuff like that anymore. But the other thing was, the movie business, the part I don't regret, is it provided me with time to learn and educate myself. You spend a great deal of time in dressing rooms waiting. I have read a lot of books during that time, and I educated myself, so to speak, with the time I had, and the travel. You know, the opportunity to make movies in India, China, Central Asia, Germany, Switzerland, Italy, places like that. But I didn't take it, I suppose, seriously enough in terms of career. That's it. That's a little bit of regret. I don't feel despondent about it at this point, because if that's the way it is, I can live with it. On the other hand, I still think I can do something very good.
Assim que terminou a entrevista, que durou 1h30, vocês imaginam então quanta coisa ficou de lado. O John Saxon me chamou e falou: olha, eu estou escrevendo um livro, porque tanto me perguntam sobre o Bruce Lee que eu resolvi contar toda a minha experiência que eu tive com ele no filme Operação Dragão. Eu falei: você faz muito bem, tenho certeza que o livro vai ser um sucesso. Vocês vão ver agora aqui no Telecine Classic o filme que John Saxon estrelou ao lado dos amigos Robert Redford e Sidney Pollack, Obsessão de Matar.